Good evening, all. Thank you for joining us. I'm Carol Mason, president of John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I'm delighted to open this exciting program virtually tonight with our esteemed Honorable Lucy Lang, who I'll talk about in a minute, the Inspector General of the State of New York. I love saying that. This program marks the first in a series of discussions that will be held by the Department of Public Management in collaboration with the Office of External Affairs, highlighting leadership, accountability, and transparency. It is based on our public sector inspection and oversight course that helps to prepare students for work combating fraud, abuse, and corruption, and strengthening the public sector integrity and efficiency. Our students and alumni who pursued undergraduate and graduate degrees have gone on to work for the FBI, the New York Inspector General, the New York City Department of Investigations, the private sector monitors, as well as inspectors generals across the country. We are proud of the fact that John Jay's Public Management Department is ranked number five, hear that, number 5 for nationally by the U.S. News and World Report in recognition of our commitment to providing students from all backgrounds high quality education that prepares them for successful careers. John Jay's Public Management Department features practitioners and scholars with deep experience. In fact, 2 faculty members are board members of the Association of Inspectors General, and they bring that type of experience and connection into the classroom, and they bring their conferences here so that they can meet our wonderfully talented students. Tonight's program is not only to reinforce our mission driving student and professional success, but also reaffirms our commitment to bringing important, timely, and enriching programming to our external partners and our greater community. Democracy cannot function without oversight and inspection. Voters and residents need truthful and accurate information as to what their government is doing in order to make meaningful voting and engagement decisions. And our professionals need that advice as well. I love working with inspectors general when I was at the Department of Justice and here, because when there are some issues and thorny issues, there are times that I view the inspectors general as our partners, and they can give us advice that helps us avoid making bad decisions. In societies where government officials are not subject to effective oversight, the public eventually concludes that all politicians and public officials are corrupt, so their support and involvement mean little. But we know that's not the truth. We know that most of our public officials, the vast majority of our government employees, are committed public servants, and we just need help in order to ensure that accountability in others. Inspectors general are important watchdogs. They can fight this corrosive tendency and highlight their work to reinforce trust in public administration. Again, I want to emphasize that we think the vast majority of public servants and public officials do their jobs honorably and with distinction. But when they don't, it's important to have this oversight. And the oversight is also important to help us do our jobs better and more effectively. Their mandate empowers them to review documents they need and to receive information from whistleblowers and other informants whose consciences impel them to come forward. In addition to investigations about potential criminal activity, conflicts of interest, or abuse, their audits reveal weaknesses and inefficiencies that make government agencies vulnerable to fraud and other problems. These reports typically offer recommendations to strengthen the operations and management of an agency, and that's when they become good partners with us to help us do our jobs better. A recent report by Inspector General Lang's office, for example, called for the state to modernize its record-keeping capabilities to comply with the HALT Act that limits solitary confinement in state prisons. In response, the Department of Corrections and the Community Supervision acknowledged the need for modernization and committed to enhancing its data management systems. A great example of how using the information helps us improve the efficiency and effectiveness of government. The department expressed dedication to addressing the issues and improving the overall HALT compliance. An inspector general's work to review and respond to incidents of fraud and other illegal activity by government entities, contractors, and vendors, especially in prominent and costly infrastructure projects, helps ensure that the state meets the highest standards of integrity, accountability, and efficiency, which benefit our public treasury and builds trust in our system of government. So we have the benefit tonight of having the presence and wisdom of one of the best inspectors general in the country. Our Inspector General, Lucy Lang, is here as a safeguard of our democracy. She is an alum of John Jay in a different way. Prior to serving as the Inspector General for the state of New York, she led our Institute for Innovation and Prosecution and used those same skills that she's bringing to this job to that job, one of integrity and accountability. And she also was an assistant district attorney in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, where she prosecuted violent crime, including homicides, and she was a special counsel for policy and projects, creating a first of its kind college course for incarcerated students with people from the district attorney's office to address policy issues. And I can tell you from sitting through many of the final presentations when Lucy was here, the ideas that come out of that program were things that we ought to be following and have been useful. Inspector General Lang is a presidential leadership scholar, a member of the Council on Criminal Justice, and she has served many New York State Bar Association task forces. She's been published in the New York Times, The Atlantic, and many other publications. And most importantly, for some members of our audience, she's also the author of a children's book called March On, which she wrote for her daughter. And it's a children's book about the 1915 Women's March for Suffrage in New York City. And I got a copy for my great nieces and nephews, and it's a wonderful, wonderful teaching tool. Inspector General Lang is a graduate of Swarthmore College and Columbia Law School, where she was editor-in-chief of the Journal of Gender and Law and has served as a lecturer in law. We look forward to hearing from her about her work and tools as she elevates our trust in government. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing first Dan Feldman, a professor of public management here at John Jay and a resident scholar in the oversight and investigation and administrative law. In his career, his illustrious career, he has had significant investigations in high-level elective and appointed positions in government. He was a former state legislator, which gives him insight into that thinking. He is a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and a contributor to the field of study through numerous academic journals and books. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Columbia, a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School, and a PhD in philosophy from the City University of New York. I think that he qualifies as well-educated. So I am now turning the mic over to Professor Feldman. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Mason, not only for those President Mason, I should say, not only for those extremely kind words, but also for the consistent support you've given our department and naturally the wonderful work you've done for our school. So I truly appreciate your efforts and your support and your work. Let me just say that our program in oversight and inspection in the master's program at John Jay is unique in the country. Our department may be number 5 in the country, which is very nice, but our particular program is, I think, number 1 because there isn't anything else like it. So it really is something that anyone who has an interest in oversight and inspection should find their way to us because we're your home. Now, let me just talk a little bit about tonight's presentation. There has been some controversy, discussion, argument about the degree to which inspectors general should be pursuing media attention. And I have argued and continue to argue strongly that they should, that their essential role in maintaining a democracy is well served by media attention. In fact, I would argue that they cannot do their jobs adequately without it. Now, I don't know if Inspector General Lang will argue with me or if she'll at least be more even-handed than I am and perhaps presenting the arguments of the other side. But in any case, that is our topic for tonight. The role, not only the role of the Inspector General, but the role of the media as connected with the role of the Inspector General. And since all these introductions have taken up a lot of time, I'm going to stop here and give Inspector General Lang the microphone.
Thank you so much, Professor Feldman, and I'm sorry to disappoint, but unfortunately, I'm not going to take the contrary position here, because I am actually of the Dan Feldman School of IGs. In fact, I am proud to say that I was given a copy of Professor Feldman's book with David Eichenthal, The Art of the Watchdog, as soon as it was announced that I had accepted the appointment as Inspector General. I read it cover to cover. I've disseminated chapters to my staff, and I consult it regularly. So I do share Professor Feldman's view that inspectors general truly can't do our job without leveraging the media. And I think that it's really exciting to think about ways in which we can do more and better transparency related work to help inspire confidence in government by using the media. So before I get into it, I do want to thank President Mason for having me, and of course, Mindy Bockstein and Jennifer Lorenzo for the work that you've done to put this evening together. But I particularly thank all of you students who are tuning in at a turbulent time in the world on a chilly night in New York City, when I'm sure there are many other things that you have pressing on your time. But it's especially enriching for me to be here before a John Jay audience, because as you heard, I am an alum of the John Jay faculty and spent some of the most rewarding time in my career at John Jay. So it's a real thrill to be back. But perhaps more excitingly, now that I'm in a leadership position, one of my real star staff members is a John Jay alum, and she is in fact a former student of Professor Feldman. In fact, she may have been in the same class that brings some of you here tonight. She's doing a really outstanding job. So I say that both to commend you all for the work you're doing at John Jay, and to let you know that there are great paths to state employment here at the offices of the New York State Inspector General. So please keep your eye on our website when you graduate. We are always looking for smart new talent. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about the office generally and the ways that we have come to think about media. And then I'll take some questions from you all and perhaps from Professor Feldman and President Mason. That's me. You heard about my background. I had the good fortune to be appointed by the governor, and it was really very unexpected. I mean, I'll go on a little bit of a tangent here because I think that it's of interest to students that, as you heard, I served as an assistant DA. I worked at John Jay, and then I left John Jay to run for Manhattan District Attorney, and I ran unsuccessfully in the 2021 Democratic primary. I say unsuccessfully because I didn't end up as DA, but in many ways it was a great success, because I do think that it was that work and the outreach that I did, learning how to campaign, both that led me to think more critically about how to use the media in furtherance of government interests, and how to leverage the media as an educational tool for the community, but also ultimately how I believe that I got the exposure that led to the opportunity for me to become Inspector General when Governor Hochul unexpectedly became governor in August of 2021 and needed to restaff government fairly quickly. In addition to serving as State Inspector General, in which role I have jurisdiction over all the state executive agencies, which is upwards of 100, I also serve as the Welfare Inspector General and the Workers' Compensation Fraud Inspector General. So all of my offices around the state focus on those three primary areas of state investigations. We have offices throughout the state: Albany, Buffalo, New York City, where I am right now, and others. And that enables us to do on-the-ground investigations in the agencies where we need to conduct them. And that can range from prisons way up in the North Country to parks way out west or on the border of Pennsylvania. And we find that it's really important that we have the capacity to conduct on-the-ground investigations, which is why we have offices throughout the state. We're combined of investigators, auditors, attorneys, forensic accountants, IT folks, and investigative aides, and have a really robust approach to conducting interdisciplinary investigations. So that means that from the time an investigation comes in, we assign to virtually every case a lawyer, an auditor, and an investigator, so that we have someone to conduct the interviews, the surveillance, and we have someone to crunch the numbers. And of course, we have someone to make sure that it is all in compliance with the law. You see here that we have jurisdiction over the executive branch agencies and authorities. We also have jurisdiction over some major infrastructure projects. For example, we oversaw the construction of the development and construction of the new Javits Center, of the Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, and other big infrastructure projects. And in those instances, we will have a team of investigators on the ground really working to do fraud prevention. We're granted authority under the state executive law, and we have, as President Mason mentioned, we have authority to conduct criminal investigations, but also, and I think critically importantly, we have the authority to issue regulatory and remedial recommendations. And so very, very often where we conduct an investigation and determine that there hasn't been criminality, but that there may be a gap in the policies of a particular agency, we will make recommendations for change that are binding. And then we follow up with the agencies to make sure that they're complying. We get complaints from all across the state, from civilians, from state staff, but all state employees do have, under the public officers law, an obligation to report suspicion of fraud and corruption, conflicts of interest to our office. These are just some of the laws that apply to our investigation, some of the powers that you'll be familiar with from other law enforcement agencies, including subpoena power, record access, conducting of interviews, putting people under oath, etc. And here are a little bit more detail about the ultimate outcomes of our investigations. As mentioned, they can also include ethics sanctions, public reporting, which is really a large part of the subject that we'll be talking about today. So when it comes to leveraging media to elevate public trust, I really think about media as being a kind of an additional check on government in the same way that we are. And so I try to approach our relationship with the media as a potentially positive one. And I think that that's a real change from how many government agencies have historically seen the media. Indeed, when I started at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in 2006, that office was very contained in how they communicated with the press. Now, we still require that all of our staff, all of our communication with the press be through our press staff or from me directly, for purpose of clarity of message and making sure that nothing inappropriate is transmitted to the public. But we really have worked to build positive relationships with the press instead of taking an approach of boxing the press out, which I think has been in many ways how other law enforcement agencies have traditionally, and other inspectors general, frankly, have historically approached their relationship with the media. Another wonderful scholar of inspectors general, Glenn Fine, who is now at Georgetown, but previously served as a Department of Justice and Department of Defense Inspector General, says the media performs a valuable service in keeping the public informed, including about IG reports on government operations. When a report receives public attention, the agency's incentive to implement corrective measures increases. And that is really the core of why we want the public to know what we're doing, because it helps put pressure on government to make the changes that we recommend. Now, nothing that we do can have quite the impact of a mainstream mass market TV program. And you've seen, probably you all don't remember a time before Law and Order, but it is definitely the case that people's impression of prosecutors changed dramatically when Law and Order came on TV. It really served to educate the public. And NCIS is a more recent example. But you know, this is an extremely popular show. And before it aired, NCIS was really barely known to the public. But it has really, the presence of the TV show has dramatically changed the public's understanding of what is happening at NCIS, and that has been good for NCIS staff as well. So short of being of issuing a huge national television program, what we are capable of doing is some of the traditional means of talking to the press, and that includes press releases. So we put press releases out usually when there is a conviction or sentence on a criminal matter, always when we put out a public report, and sometimes when we put out a sort of bulk, when we publish a bulk of letters that include remedial recommendations, et cetera. And as is the case with many other government agencies, when we put a press release out, often things are picked up by the press. Sometimes we'll get calls in, we're responsive to them, et cetera. So that is sort of basic press 101 that pre-existed my arrival at the office. That has always been done. Now, I will say that a change that has happened under my administration here, and one that not everyone agrees with, is that we tend not to do press releases anymore when people are arrested. And that's based on a philosophical view of mine that because folks are innocent until proven guilty, I don't want to be creating an online paper trail that will muck up folks' lives and reputations if ultimately a case is dismissed or someone is acquitted at trial, et cetera. So that's a change. We generally only do press releases with respect to reports, and then on criminal matters with convictions and sentences. In addition to what is called earned media, which is to say press about things we have done, we also try to put out more proactive media. So I have written a number of op-eds that we shop around various publications that reach our public about issues that are important here. When we have, in the wake of COVID, done a whole lot of work on the misuse of COVID relief funds. And so I wrote an op-ed about our interagency collaboration on those investigations. Domestic violence is a deeply important issue to me because of my background working on domestic violence cases. And so I very recently put out a piece in the Times-Union that referenced some work of the office, but really was about much more broadly about reframing domestic violence as a public health issue. And that's a way that I think we can use the sort of the soapbox of the office to talk to the public about issues that matter that we're working on. We have also basically been of the mind that anytime the press wants to talk to us, as long as it's not about a confidential matter, we want to talk to the press. So you can see that over the course of 2003, over that year alone, I did 13 TV interviews, a whole bunch of print, radio, podcast interviews, and it was a really productive year for us in terms of getting out in the public. And I really try whenever I am answering questions about our work to make sure to also plug the fact that we are here to take complaints from the public. And I share our hotline number and our social media information in hopes that that will increase people's reporting, which will enable us to do more investigations and to ferret out fraud and corruption more easily and effectively.
In state government.
Now, I am not sure if you are going to be able to hear the next video, so I'm going to click to it. And Professor Feldman, you'll give me a thumbs up if you can hear, and if not, we'll move on to the next slide.
In state government, there's an office that has jurisdiction over all executive branch agencies, departments, divisions, officers, boards, and commissions, and more. It's a pretty powerful place. It's called the Office of the Inspector General. Now, during the Cuomo administration, the IG's office was practically invisible, but things have changed. Just over a year ago, a new Inspector General was installed, and it's almost like New York has a brand new cop on the beat. Her name is Lucy Lang.
The report that we put out today detailed a 4-year investigation into the testing system the Department of Corrections was using to test substances that they suspected to be illegal narcotic drugs. And of course, this was during a time when the opiate crisis is surging both across the country and behind bars. And devastatingly, it turned out that this test was being used improperly, that what were intended to be preliminary findings were being used as final findings rather than being confirmed. And folks were being subjected to things like solitary confinement, we're missing parole hearings, and other disciplinary repercussions.
We had mentioned in the intro to you being here this morning is domestic violence. Can you talk about how your agency has improved the way that the state reports it and how they respond to incidents?
Well, this investigation started by a truly devastating tragedy, which was a case in which a state employee was a victim of ongoing terrible domestic abuse. I served as a domestic violence prosecutor for many years, and so the issue feels very personal to me. What happened in this case is that the victim was saving evidence of her abuse on her state-issued cell phone. And when she reported it to her supervisors, rather than being given the resources that the state provides to support domestic violence survivors, she was reprimanded for misusing her state phone. And sadly, several months later, her abuser killed her and took his own life. So that led to a long investigation that included ultimately the issuance of an executive order requiring all of the state agencies to collaborate with the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence to train their staff to identify the warning signs of domestic violence and to better support state workers who may be at risk.
It's incredible. Wow. I mean, it's so important to bring awareness to it and let folks know that they can be heard in a safe way.
That's exactly right. And the son of the victim in this case said to me after we completed the investigation, it didn't have to be
Yeah,
this way.
of course.
And that's exactly right.
What happened here is that warning signs were disregarded. And that is a failure of education, a failure of training, and is the reason that domestic violence has for generations existed outside of the public sphere. And we have to work together to solve that.
So I experienced a tragedy when I was in college, which was that a old childhood friend of mine was murdered by her brother. And as I watched this unfold in the months and years after that tragedy, I saw the criminal justice system both working for and against the victim's family, who happened also to be the family of the perpetrator of the crime. And it was that led me ultimately to become a prosecutor in Manhattan, where I worked prosecuting homicides, domestic violence, and gun violence. And in that job, I started to realize that I was only seeing one side of the system, which led me to build a college and prison program that I taught for a number of years in New York State's prisons, and started to see the system from multiple sides. And I'm really fortunate now to be serving as Inspector General and to be really committed to doing the on-the-ground work of connecting with New Yorkers, especially vulnerable New Yorkers, and trying to make sure that the systems designed to serve them are doing just that with the most integrity possible.
Adding a lot of transparency to what you do in your office. Can you kind of describe for our viewers how it looked like before and what you've changed to make it more transparent now?
For the first time, we created an open data portal. And every month we upload all of the information about complaints we receive, where they come from, what agencies they relate to, and how they're being handled within the office. And we're doing this for two reasons. One is so that journalists, researchers, and members of the public can dig in and try to understand what it is we're doing. And the other is to really lead by example to the agencies under our jurisdiction and encourage them to become more transparent with the public.
So those are a few examples of times when the reporters have reached out and said, will you go on air about this? And we have been happy to comply. We have also invited the press in ourselves in the form of press conferences or roundtables. And here are a couple of examples. You saw some footage from the press conference we did about the domestic violence investigation that I described. But a roundtable is another format in which we invite the press in and myself and some other folks who have expertise on the issue at hand. In this case, it was with respect to women's rights, and we did it properly in Seneca Falls. And we invite the press in to hear from us and to ask questions. I'm also, while we're talking about inviting the press in and rebuilding a relationship, we have also tried to develop more informal relationships with the members of the press who follow our office and our work. So that's included, it has included, you may know that in the Capitol, the Legislative Correspondents Association has a series of offices where all of the reporters who cover Albany sit. And so periodically we call over and say, are there folks in the office? Can we come by and say hello? And so here's an example of what happened when I did that once.
We're not getting the audio on this one.
Oh, you're not getting the audio? All
No.
right, well, what happened happened in that instance is that there is a piano in the Legislative Correspondence Association that apparently belonged to Harry Truman, and I couldn't resist playing it. So they actually, they may not invite me back now that they've heard me poorly play the piano. But I do think that there is a lot to be said for getting to know people a little bit beyond the bounds of the office and of the cases. We have annual reporting requirements with respect to some parts of our portfolio, including workers' compensation and including our oversight of the Gaming Commission. So every year we have to put out a report for the public. We also have voluntarily initiated a 2-year look back on all of our work more generally, and we published a biannual report after the first 2 years, and 2 years, or about a year from now, we'll publish the next one, and that is contains information about everything from our cases to how we're staffed and the kind of community outreach we've been doing. With respect to community outreach, I have mentioned a few times how much we like to get out there, but across the state, I encourage members of the staff to go to community meetings, to meet with folks at panel conversations, to go to classes just like this one, and to educate the public about what we're doing. We also do more sort of formal presentations than this, including presentations to the Workers' Compensation Board, and including more kind of prepared and formalized reporting on our work. There you can see my colleague Jack Wild doing community board meeting with the NYPD. And so really, again, anytime someone reaches out and says they want to hear from us, we think about the best way to present our work to the population who they serve. I would say that the most dramatic change from a media perspective since I've taken office has been the development of our social media accounts. The office had not previously had them. Many inspectors general don't have them at all still. And we really felt like it was worth undertaking and trying to build up a social media presence to reach a more diverse range of New Yorkers. Because of course, the New Yorkers who are following us on our website alone, or who are waiting for information in newspapers, is limited to a particular category of New Yorker. So it has been very much part of our interest in diversifying our access that we have developed social media accounts. Our LinkedIn is interestingly our sort of most trafficked, and I think that that's partially because we do a lot of posting to a professional network there. We've also used LinkedIn to help build out an alumni network, because the office is nearly 40 years old now. I'm the 11th IG, and we are really proud to be inviting back all of the office's alums to get together on a couple of occasions this coming month, which I'm really looking forward to. And I think that it really is thanks to our LinkedIn presence that we've been able to harness that network. As you can see, we are regularly posting to solicit complaints. So we put out our hotline number, 1-800-DO-RIGHT, at every chance we can. And these are just a few samples of the kind of graphics that we put together to try to encourage people to report. We also do more sort of friendly, casual posts where we highlight the work of the staff. You can see our staff from all over the state, including interns here, who are really just trying to reflect a more personal side of the office. You know, I found as a prosecutor so often that people were really afraid to report crimes that had happened to them. That folks, that huge categories of people, but especially vulnerable New Yorkers, very often folks who may have, who may not be citizens, people are, and reasonably so, afraid to show up in a law enforcement building, or to call an official number, or to put their information in a formal email. And so we have found that this is a way by creating a more sort of friendly, approachable view of the office, that we can encourage people that we are trustworthy with their complaints and concerns about government. We will take them seriously, and we will investigate everything through to its conclusion. But this is part of it is designed to ideally kind of take the edge off and remove some of the fear. All right, now I'm going to just share a couple of these kind of lighter touch Instagram videos that we have been experimenting with. In fact, these are amongst our most popular videos we've done. And, you know, the interesting thing that I like about social media is that we can experiment. So I don't know if everyone agrees that this is a good use of our social media, but we're learning as we go and we get feedback. So here are a few examples. Could you hear that, Professor?
The audio on that was very strange. I think there was something wrong with it.
Something wrong with it? All
Yeah.
right, we'll try the next one. But that was an example of when we were doing work on the state's transition to electric vehicles and fleet cars, and we were highlighting some of that work that's been done. Right before I took office in June of 2021, the legislature gave our office jurisdiction over the Gaming Commission, and that was a distinction from before when the Gaming Commission had an internal inspector general. And as a result, we have been doing a lot of work to educate the gaming community about their reporting requirements and to educate the public, especially with the onslaught of mobile sports betting and the tremendous investment that is being made into gaming across New York State, about the fact that we are here to receive complaints and concerns about corruption in gaming. So here is a video on that, and give me a thumbs up, Professor, if you can hear it.
I'm New York State Inspector General Lucy Lang. Today, a record 50.4 million Americans are expected to bet on the Super Bowl, a 61% increase from just last year. With an estimated $16 billion being wagered and so many new and different ways for sports fans to place their bets, the stakes have never been higher. We here at the Offices of the Inspector General want to remind you to do your part in tackling corruption and intercepting fraud by reporting misconduct in gaming to our office at 1-800-DO-RIGHT. Don't hesitate to throw a flag on the play if you suspect you've been fouled. You can bet that the Office of the Gaming Inspector General wants to know about it.
I'm very lucky that I have a brilliant young director of external relations who can write me crackerjack lines like that for social media. And here's an example of some additional outreach that features another member of our staff.
Hola, si quieres comunicar un crimen ocurriendo dentro del gobierno del estado de Nueva York, por favor, danos una llamada a la oficina del inspector general al número 1-800-DORIGHT. Gracias.
And finally, and you'll see how much we've been doubling down on trying to solicit gaming related complaints. Here's another.
Hey, it's New York State Inspector General Lucy Lang, and I'm here with Teddy to let you know that in advance of the Belmont Stakes tomorrow, we're thrilled to announce publication of our 2022 annual report on Gaming Commission oversight. Learn more at ig.ny.gov.
So those are some examples of the ways in which we have intentionally leveraged media in an effort to develop better relationships with the public and reflect the extent to which we are watching the agencies under our jurisdiction to make sure that they're complying with the law. And I look forward to your thoughts and questions, with my gratitude to all of you for having me here.
Okay. Well, we have a couple of questions. Some are pretty straightforward. The first question was, does the Inspector General have jurisdiction over John Jay College?
Indeed, the Inspector General does have jurisdiction over John Jay College. So if you suspect fraud and corruption at John Jay College, I am your gal. We have jurisdiction over the CUNY and SUNY schools.
Okay. The second question, I think your staff, Jennifer, or your staff posted a response, but you might want to do an oral response to it as well. And that is, where can we obtain more information on upcoming IG press conferences and roundtables, especially around women's rights and preventing domestic violence?
Well, I can tell you now that we don't have anything planned on that subject at this moment, but if you follow us at New York State Inspector General on social media, we always post upcoming events there.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a moment now with respect to the very first issue I raised in my introduction. And that is, some people claim that the sort of drumbeat of stories from from inspectors general when they uncover fraud and corruption has actually worsened the public's sense of trust in government. Now, again, as you know, I am not on that side of the argument, but they will argue that rather than increasing trust in government, which was in fact one of the goals of the Inspector General Act of 1978, perhaps all these stories about misbehavior that come from IG offices has actually worsened the level of trust.
It's, you know, look, there's certainly merit to that. But to my mind, it's wrong-headed. I mean, if you were to, I just today was looking at the Department of Labor IG's recent press releases, and it's actually in some ways far more modest than you might expect, you know? And it's part of why I think it's important to publicize not just ultimate outcomes, you know, or not just criminal outcomes, but kind of all of the work. So for example, when I took office there, when we don't end up referring a case for criminal prosecution, or we don't do a big public report, we will generally just write a letter to the commissioner of an agency explaining what went wrong and making recommendations as to what should be fixed. And in the past, those were non-public. Now, we made a commitment when we started that we would publish those letters so that people would know, even though there's not a requirement that we publish them, people would know that even if there's not something grossly criminal happening, that we're watching and things are working. And you know, very often things aren't actually as bad as folks think they might be. So I think that has made kind of a difference in moderating that concern that there's just an onslaught of information about vast corruption in government. We also went back and retroactively published 2 decades almost worth of old letters that came from our office so that people could see what the office had been up to all this time. And I think that helps as well, because there is so much that goes on in government that is decent people trying to do the right thing, but either making errors, or there are kind of regulatory gaps, et cetera, that just need to be shored up. So I do think that part of it is educating the public about the whole scope of what's challenging in government, not just, you know, when some high level official has to be put in handcuffs and sort of marched away for taking bribes.
Okay, thank you. We got a raft of new questions. So first one is this, and this is from one of the students in my class, actually. I understand the value of media and the press when you've released a report and want to publicize the findings. But how do you view the press when they're trying to inquire about your ongoing investigations and maybe publishing details that you're not ready to make public?
Look, it happens, and it's always a risk with confidential investigations that matters will get out into the public that will be concerning to us. But we do everything we can to shore up confidentiality internally. And for the most part, the press understands that when there's an ongoing investigation, there's very little that we're at liberty to share, and that's for good reason. So I also think that part of it is developing trusting relationships with the press, understanding that they also have to do their job, but so that they don't think that we're just stonewalling when we say no. We say, we can't tell you that for good reason, but you know that if there is an outcome, you know, you'll be amongst the first to know. It'll be made public.
Thank you. This one may help to clarify things for some people, though the answer is pretty straightforward. But the question is, does the New York State IG have control over NYPD, New York City Police Department, creating better mental health programs for police officers?
We don't have jurisdiction over the NYPD. My counterpart at the city level, the commissioner of the Department of Investigations, has jurisdiction over the NYPD and has a very robust unit that's dedicated to NYPD oversight. We have oversight over New York State troopers and are in regular communication with state troopers. As you heard, our biggest the biggest volume of complaints that come into our agency are related to the State Department of Corrections. So we do spend a tremendous amount of time on those investigations, but we also, because we're really dedicated to prevention, we do train every incoming class of new corrections officers in the state ethics laws. And we are working with the state police in developing trainings for state police as well.
This next one is real open-ended, so I imagine you can go on for quite a while if you wanted to, but the question is, what are the biggest challenges your office is currently
Gosh, no, it's a tough time to be in government in general. I think that even in New York State government, there is a feeling of kind of helplessness about some of the issues that we're facing nationally or locally here in New York City. There are mental health challenges, you know, across the board. We're all working to keep our staff healthy and happy and inspired at a time when people have a lot of criticism about government. And you know, and I should follow up on something President Mason said earlier about public servants, which is that what I love most about this job is being out in the agencies. So I can't remember if I mentioned that I have visited all 44 state prisons. I visited all the juvenile facilities, and this year's the centennial of the New York State parks. So that's been a much more uplifting set of visits, but we visited like, I don't know, 30 or 40 state parks this year. And when I go on these visits, sometimes we call in advance and say we're coming. Sometimes we just show up, and it can be a little bit alarming, but folks have kind of adjusted to it. And I will walk the trails of the park with the parks manager and their some of the sanitation staff or whatever. And first, it does build a relationship, and you get tips from people that way when you're just sort of walking the trails. But second, it reminds me why we work in government in the first place, which is to serve the people. And it's so exhilarating to see how many people are doing the hard work of government, of maintaining our parks trails, of making sure people obey the speed limit, you know, of doing these sort of seemingly simple things, but that are about keeping all of us safe and healthy. So the greatest privilege of my job is seeing so many state employees doing the everyday work of government and doing it well and effectively and with integrity.
Well, we're now pretty close to out of time. Well, you know what? Maybe I can squeeze in one more, and this one is a wild one, and I think I couldn't imagine how you can answer it. But let's say you got the question says, if you got poached by the incoming president to be an IG over a federal body, and you needed to implement fraud prevention, what would you do? And I'm going to alter the question to make it harder to say, if somehow you were forced to work for the incoming president to be an IG over a federal body and you need to implement fraud prevention, what would you do?
Well, Professor, as you know, one of my big concerns right now, and I was just writing something about this right before we hopped on here, is about what the incoming administration may do to federal inspectors general. I think that there is a real risk of weaponizing the inspectors general and making them sort of pawns of the executive in any instance. And actually, when I took office, I told the governor that I was only going to do it if I didn't sit as a member of the cabinet and if the governor didn't have any editorial control over the work that we were putting out. And she agreed. That was a distinction from some folks in the past in this office, but I don't see how you can do the work of oversight without maintaining that really committed independence. And I don't, I worry about that with respect to the federal inspectors general in the coming years. The core of doing good investigative work is hiring people with integrity. And so if I found myself in a position where I was serving as a federal inspectors general under any executive, I would make sure that I was retaining the folks who were there who know how to do the work well and recruiting the best and the brightest to continue doing the work well. And I would be really determined to keep that firewall between the IG and the executive, because I don't believe that having a sham IG helps anyone or serves the purpose of inspectors general, which is a great American tradition dating back to the Revolution. In fact, when we copied it from the Napoleonic military tradition.
Well, thank you so very much, not only on behalf of the audience today, but on behalf of the people of the state of New York. We're very lucky to have you in both respects. So I thank you.
I'm very lucky to be a member of the John Jay family. I wish all of you the absolute best and hope that you will follow us at follow us at New York State IG, and that you will report any concerns about fraud or corruption to 1-800-DO-RIGHT. And those of you who may be interested in a career in oversight, please feel free to follow us, look for internships and job postings on our website. And I wish you all the best. You couldn't be at a better place than John Jay College.
Thank you again.